Pleased to be joined by Central Valley Congressman David Valadao. Representative, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. One of the things we want to jump into right away has been one of the biggest stories that has been going on in the Central Valley so far, and that has been immigration raids conducted by ICE and recent Border Patrol operations. There's been an attitude definitely from the president that wanting to project a strong border and force, but at the same time, it's felt that in some of these communities and in the Central Valley and in your district that there's been some fear that has been stoked by that same manner that the president has gone on about. I just want to get your reaction to his policies so far and the operations that have gone on since in your communities.
Well, obviously, I'm supportive of us securing the border, and I'm very supportive of us deporting people who are here to do us harm. We know that people came across the border that have criminal records who are dangerous to our communities, and I think the president is right to go after them and remove them from our country and make sure that they don't come back. Some of the people that were collateral damage in this are people that on their way to the fields to work, and some of those stories are sad to see. And we've reached out to the administration, let them know that we were concerned. Continue to reach out to leadership here in the House to make sure they know that these are the people who help keep our nation fed, and they play a vital role in our economy and in our communities, and that we needed to be aware of that and be respectful of that. I am continuing to work with folks here in the House to work on legislation that we can hopefully get across the line to help address some of these issues, so that we're not having these people live in the shadows forever.
I know in the past when we've talked, some of that includes more immigration judges and also an increase in visas as well. Is that kind of what the legislation you're expecting to pass looks like?
Well, for ag specifically, the H-2A program, you have to understand that, especially year-round agriculture like dairy or processing plants and a lot of these facilities, there is no program that's legitimately works for them, and they do not qualify for H-2A. So we have to come up with something that works for them.
And then, in that same respect too, I mean, how do you respond to some of the reactions from within your district? Obviously, people are scared, and it may not be even people that are at risk of deportation, but it's those who have families and friends, and of course, have maybe a loved one that is at risk.
No, and we have heard from quite a few people. We completely understand why they are fearful because of some of the things we've seen on the news. We have to make sure that the administration knows that they need to continue to target the criminal element that is here to do harm, and try to be helpful any way we can to protect those who, again, play a huge role in our economy. And it's something I've pointed out to leadership on multiple occasions. 70% of the workforce in agriculture is undocumented. 80% of the workforce in construction is undocumented. And if you're trying to lower the cost of food, or you're trying to lower the cost of houses or anything related that needs to be built, deporting the people that do a lot of that work is probably not how you accomplish that. So I think we need to figure out how to address this. One of those ways is to make sure we have a legal workforce, let these people come out of the shadows, figure out who they are, and if there are a criminal element in there. Obviously, that's not something we want in our country. But those who are just trying to be a good part of our economy, a good part of our communities, I think we should look for ways to work with them and try to address that in a respectful manner.
And then right now, prices at the grocery store are still on the rise. Obviously, there's not much presidential administration or anyone can do with an epidemic like bird flu. But what about the cost of some other goods in the market that are remaining high with inflation? Obviously, a change in presidential administrations doesn't do everything, but what's your reaction to prices staying high as the presidential administration changed?
Well, I think on the egg one, on the bird flu specifically, there is stuff that can be done and that needs to be addressed. And we had a meeting on my Ag Appropriations Committee just this week with folks from the Department of Agriculture and the FDA about what can be done to address this. They are developing vaccines. Some of those vaccines might work for the egg layers. They might not work for the broilers where we get the meat. The dairy industry is also looking at that because we did have a huge bout with bird flu in cattle across many of our states, including California. And that had an impact on milk production and actually lowered the state of California's milk production. And we are the number one ag state, or dairy state and ag state. And so that had a dramatic effect on costs as well. So I think the administration has to get involved in this issue. There is a process now where they are developing vaccines, trying to find more efficient ways of delivering those vaccines and making sure that they're used in a way that, or at least we move forward in a way that doesn't affect our trade partners, because the trading side of it is a problem if we do decide to vaccinate. It changes the way we have to work with and test and make sure that we have eliminated the virus here in the United States for us to be able to move some of these products abroad. But we want to make sure that those products are available, they're safe, and that they're here in the U.S. in a plentiful way so that we don't see the prices continue to escalate. And this is something that the administration has to get engaged in, have to communicate with. But hopefully, we'll be able to do that now that we have a Secretary of Ag, at least at USDA, and be able to start that process.
Yeah, Brooke Rollins, her confirmation, I think, just came in through today, and I believe unanimous. I think it was a pretty landslide vote to get her through.
There's
Which
like 72
was it,
total, which is
72? Yeah.
yeah. So that means there was quite a few Democrats that voted for. So that I think that's a pretty good sign of faith in her. I have not met her yet, but I look forward to working with her.
Yeah, I imagine it'll be much more cordial than maybe some of your last interactions with Tom Vilsack. Can you kind of describe maybe the difference between those interactions between the former governor of Iowa?
Vilsack had been in the job for quite some time, and I felt like he wasn't as understanding of agriculture outside of Iowa. He obviously had his favorites, and we struggled with that. And we had interactions with him, especially after the storms that affected a lot of our agriculture in the Central Valley. And we felt he had jurisdiction to be more helpful, and he wasn't using his authorities to do so. And we called him out in committee on that. And the previous administration, and now the same administration back, I mean, under President Trump, when he was the 45th president, Perdue was the secretary at that time of ag, and he was actually helpful to a lot of farmers in other parts of the country who had suffered severe damages from storms. And when that happened under Vilsack's watch, he was not as helpful. And it took us dragging him, kicking and screaming to be able to help some of our farmers. And we still haven't really gotten that help. And so hopefully this new incoming secretary will be more aware of what's going on and more willing to help, just like Secretary Perdue was.
And then last question on kind of prices of what we're seeing right now. Tariffs have obviously been a topic of conversation. I know we talked about California's role in exporting abroad. What are your thoughts on the administration's tariff, I guess, talk? Because there was this deal that had been reached to suspend for another 30 days within North America. But at the same time, too, it seems it very has a very familiar theme to the border wall that the former or that now President Trump had been pushing in his first term, and that some of the wall was built and it was definitely a posture, but at the end of the day, it resulted in different border policy. Is that kind of what you see here with the tariffs? It's this big threat, but maybe at the end of the day, there's some deal that's worked out in between.
No, I do believe he's going to target some of these, and he is looking at implementing a few of the tariffs. There has been a few circumstances where he's threatened and then backed off the threat once there was some concessions from the trading partner from the other country. And there's going to be some where I don't believe there will be concessions, and that needs to be addressed. I do believe there is a role for tariffs. I'm not a huge fan of tariffs, but it is something that back before I was ever in elected office, I remember coming to Washington, D.C. and talking to legislators as a dairy farmer and saying, you've got countries subsidizing, you've got countries that don't live by the same standards that we live, and they have these unfair advantages over U.S. farmers, and we have to find ways to protect our farmers. We're not going to lower our standards. We're not going to lower what we're able to pay our employees. We're not going to get rid of some of the standards for our quality or for some of the chemicals and things that we have to use, which add cost. So if we're not going to change those things, and we don't want to make the product less safe, we have to make sure that we're able to compete on a level playing field, either force these other countries to live by our rules and regulations or tariff them so that we're on a level playing field so that we have at least the ability to compete.
And just these last couple of topics I want to cover, I think whether this is a true passion of yours or maybe a forced passion through just based on the way California works, permitting is something that's been very important to you in getting through a permitting process and expediting a permitting process through legislation in the House. What was your reaction when you saw California Governor Newsom, for a very perhaps good cause, get rid of the CEQA process for rebuilding homes that were damaged by fires, but at the same time, too, obviously there's I imagine a lot of water infrastructure you would have liked to have had fixed or gone through CEQA or without having to go through CEQA during those floods that happened a couple years ago. Of course, now on the heels of this storm system that's going to be coming through.
So honestly, I welcome the ability for him to do that, and I'm glad he's doing it. I just wish they would be a little more aware that that would help us a lot throughout the entire year, throughout all the years, when we're looking through all the different water projects that should be built. If you look at, some of the construction along Bryant Kern Canal or building Sites Reservoir, expansion of Shasta, building even Temperance Flat, that project would have been amazing for us in the Central Valley, right above Bryant Dam. and that one's kind of fallen to the wayside. And it's something we should be looking at and should be talked about. And if we had done some good permitting reform, it would allow us to move forward. But the frustration is the legislature in California, run by Democrats, and this governor, Gavin Newsom, they do this kind of stuff all the time. If they want to build a football stadium in San Francisco, they exempt all the environmental regulations. Build a water reservoir? Absolutely not. They won't do a thing for us. If we're going to build high-speed rail, exempt it. And they're moving forward on a project through the valley, and they don't even have all the land purchased. And so you see all this money being spent, and they don't even have a clear path to their destination in Bakersfield and a clear path to their destination in Merced. And they've got so much money already invested, and it continues. And they expedite these processes for their projects they like, but then ignore projects we desperately need in the Central Valley and the state of California.
And just last question on this topic before I want to switch over to veterans real quick. On this topic too, do you think, unfortunately, due to these fires, this makes the governor maybe more amicable to try to work with President Trump and perhaps yourself too on some of these reservoir reforms and building sites that I know that you've been trying to push through for some time?
I hope so. I really do. This is an opportunity for him to actually have a lasting impact on the state in a positive way that can help address issues that we've desperately been trying to get across the line for years. And this isn't something that's been going on for 3 or 4 years. We've been talking about some of these projects like Sites Reservoir for decades, and we should have been doing these. And the fact that they've been holding them up, it takes this much devastation to get them to finally wake up. And it's sad to see, but hopefully they learn something from this, and we'll continue to be supportive in the long term for this infrastructure.
And this last topic, real quick, will be on veterans. I know that you've been recently putting through some legislation, introducing legislation in the House regarding veterans and veteran benefits as well. Can you talk about a little bit what you've done?
Well, some of the stuff that we're working on right now has to do with making it easier for veterans to apply for their benefits and get their paperwork done. It's just transparency and expediting processes to make their lives a little bit easier. I mean, obviously, our biggest priority for myself, Vince Fong, and Kevin McCarthy back when he was there as well would be to get that clinic done. And it's something that I hear constantly from our veterans, the complaints, and from that project being so, I mean, dragged through the mud on every single court case because of one developer down in Beverly Hills is a frustrating one. We've got language in the appropriations bill that we hope will get across the line, and it'll give our new Secretary of the Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins, an opportunity to actually push this through because we give him the authority to build if there's no court order from a judge telling him specifically not to, and that's something that they've not had the ability to do in the past. And we hope that they take advantage of that, and we get it across the line, and we get that thing built finally.
And that'll be my last question for you too. I know that getting through this is something that you've been wanting to do for some time. Is there a timetable that you have if things work well? And of course, can you speak a little bit too about Doug Collins, a former House Republican, being in that seat and maybe understanding some of where you're coming from in trying to work with you and of course Representative Vince Fong as well?
Yeah, Doug and I came to Congress together in 2013, so I've known him for over 10 years now. I think he's a great member of Congress, was a great member of Congress. He obviously left for a period of time, and I think he's going to do a great job at the VA. I think he's a very open-minded, very intelligent, very well thought out person, and I think he's going to look for every opportunity to get things done. And as I think we've all seen from all the executive orders, and this president is not afraid to push things through and be challenged in court. And this is one that I feel like they really need to push forward. And I expect Doug Collins will be happy to do that as well. And I'm looking forward to that opportunity with him.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Representative. Have a good rest of your day. Appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.